to the entire. Thank you, Allie. I always forget about recording. So the first thing I want to do in terms of an introduction to the council is just to mention that we look at the entire food system. This means that we're looking at the parts of the food system that actually make it operate, that cycle of farm and fisheries production, food processing, food distribution, retail, consumption, including food access, and also the management of wasted food and food waste. And that we also look at the parts of the system that are outside of that cycle but have impacts on all of it, including healthy soils, land access, access to capital, clean air, a supportive policy environment, clean water, and there are other elements as well that have an impact on all of the different parts of that inner circle. I wanted just also to share some key facts with you about our food system here in Rhode Island. So we look at available data every year. It comes from many sources. Most of them are pulled from national data sets like the US Census, the American Community Survey, the Census of Agriculture, the Bureau of Labor Statistics, and many others. Some of the key points that we want to share are that our food sector economic output overall is $12 billion. It's actually 11.9, so we rounded up a little bit there. So it's a significant part of our state's economy. It also supports 75,800 jobs across the food sector. We have over 55,000 acres in active farmland right now that's being farmed by over 1,000 farms. We also have a significant commercial seafood and aquaculture sector that has over $100 million of sales. We also have a lot of challenges in our food system, one of the primary ones being that we have 1 in 6 households struggling with hunger. This was up at 1 in 4 over COVID and has come to 1 in 6 in the past year. So the Rhode Island Food Policy Council tracks a lot of data. We're launching an up-to-date online database later this fall where key metrics related to jobs, economic impact, agriculture, land use, commercial fisheries, and much more will be continuously updated and available for everyone. So stay tuned on that. We will let you know. And we don't just rely on external data sources. We also run an annual network survey to understand the needs and priorities of you, the council members, and the wider group of Rhode Island stakeholders in our food system. And this survey is open to everyone, including people whose main contact with our food system is through buying and eating food. So the objectives of this survey are really to understand who's participating in the network and identify where we might need some growth, to identify the network's priorities, and to understand what network members value most about what the Rhode Island Food Policy Council does. This year's survey ran in April, and it received a total of 512 responses. We're going to be offering a lot more detailed information about the survey later this fall. For now, I just really wanted to share what our network members overall rated as the highest priority activities for improving Rhode Island's food system by 2030. And these actually are in order. They were all rated important, but most important was preserve and protect agricultural land, reducing inequity in the food system, supporting small food businesses by providing capital and technical assistance, ensuring access to affordable, culturally appropriate food for all people, and promoting climate smart practices. So you can stay tuned for more detailed data and analysis that will talk about what's going on in subcategories of respondents, like what farmers are thinking, what commercial fisheries folks are thinking, what hospitality workers are thinking later this fall. And the last thing I want to share is that everything we do at the council is shaped by the work of leaders in our communities, in our municipalities and our state agencies, and leaders across the region. Each year, the council collectively shapes strategic goals, and those goals are always in alignment with a couple of key documents that you can see here. The first one is our state's food strategy, Relish Rhody. We're also in alignment with a New England-wide state food system planners partnership, which the council participates in along with the Rhode Island Director of Food Strategy. and 5 other backbone organizations in the New England states that are working together to help our regional food system become more just and resilient. So the Council has strategic priorities that are related to increasing food sovereignty, increasing the amount of funding from the federal government that comes to important projects in Rhode Island, establishing a supportive policy environment, which you'll be hearing a lot more about today, and overall just growing the size and strength and diversity of our network in a way that confers enhanced status and power upon all of the members of the network. So with that introduction to the state's food system and to the Council itself, I'm going to hand things over to Council member and Policy Committee Chair Steve Arthurs to share the 2022 legislative session overview. And I will come off of sharing slides so you can see them a little bit better.
Thank you, Nessa. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm just going to spend a few minutes trying to give an overview of what happened during the last General Assembly session. So that'll include a number of bills that were passed. We'll actually touch on a few bills that did not pass because they're probably going to come back again this session. And then we'll take a look at some of the key elements of the budget, because the budget represents another way to, pass legislation, so to speak, and pass regulations and laws. So first off, most people are aware there were 3 significant pieces of legislation that came out of the General Assembly. One was a legalization of marijuana. The second one, these aren't in any particular order, was a package of housing bills that came out of it. There were 10 individual bills regarding housing that came out of it. And of course, at the very end of the session, we saw the gun control legislation, 3 different bills pass. But there were also a number of other bills that were of significance that I'll touch on. There was a whole group of bills that you could label under environmental in nature. Some of these were a follow-up to add teeth, so to speak, to the Climate Act that was passed in 2021. But we saw a number of bills passed, including the PFAS in drinking water, PFAS in packaging, eliminating that. The PFAS in packaging has been a bill that's been introduced for the last 5 sessions and came to fruition this session. We saw the Plastic Waste Reduction Act. The legislation about which it essentially bans the use of non-reusable plastic bags. That's been introduced in 10 of the last 11 sessions and finally passed this section. Another significant bill we saw, it's going to guarantee 100% use of renewable energy by 2033. Once again, it adds a little bit more substance to the Climate Act past the previous session. We saw the Green Building Act pass. There was another piece of legislation that established an advisory board to monitor the equity as it applies to different facets of the Climate Act. Some of the other non-environmental one of significance that we were tracking as a council were there was a bill that streamlined the application process to get SNAP benefits, particularly for elderly people, those over 65, I guess that would be elderly. Increase the amount that can be earned before losing unemployment benefits. Exempted nonprofit food banks from all the registration and bureaucracy that was previously required in order for them to request donations. That's just a few of the bills, but it gives you a general flavor of, what the focus of the General Assembly was. There are also some bills that did not pass, but it moved along the chain and process, so to speak. There were 4 or 5 different major labor type bills, including minimum wage, expansion of family medical leave, employer-employee contributions to TDI, and workplace bullying legislation. They usually come back in one form or another in nearly every session, and I'm sure they're going to be back for the upcoming session as well. One of the big ones that did not show any movement that people anticipated was reform to the Officers' Bill of Rights, the Police Officers' Bill of Rights. That's always a challenge in the General Assembly because a number of members are or were in law enforcement. We saw the Shoreline Access Bill pass the House and did not pass the Senate. That will come back. The Medicaid coverage for abortions became a hot topic right at the end of the session. It seemed to be making progress, but did not move forward. The Speaker has committed to addressing that as one of the first issues in the upcoming session. There's another bill for the constitutional right to an education, which passed the Senate, was sent to the House, and died there. Another piece of significant legislation which would support the Climate Act was solar panel tax breaks, both at the state level and the local level. And that is probably most likely going to come back again this session as well. So, those are bills that came right out of the General Assembly. But as I mentioned, there's significant things that come out of the budget, which also comes out of the General Assembly. So we saw a number of different bills. The budget was 13.6 billion, which is the largest it's ever been. The main reason for that is it included many of the dollars from the American Rescue Plan Act, the federal dollars that the state received. So we saw quite a bit allocated towards housing, which both helps fund the bills that were passed and does some incremental projects as well. So there was $100 million allocated for affordable housing, $30 million to help people with make down payment on a home, 25 million in community revitalization, and 20 million specifically earmarked for homeless housing. We also saw as part of that the appointment of a housing czar. Once again, this was outlined in the budget, never really did come up as separate legislation in the General Assembly. There was a number of other socioeconomic type inclusions in the budget, from the Medicaid expansion to mothers and children through the first 12 months. 438 million was allocated for the individual child tax credit, which is $250 per child. There was 45 million earmarked for nursing home staffing. 1.5 million was earmarked for the SNAP incentive program into retail, something that we had worked on as part of the council for the past couple of years. We saw $180 million allocated for the Eleanor Slater Hospital to try and get that up to par. 100 million was allocated to replenish the unemployment fund, which was drained during the early stages of COVID. We saw the increased reimbursement regulations with regard to healthcare. We saw a significant number of investments in school infrastructure. The most important for the council benefit, we saw $700,000 allocated towards LASA. Some of the other areas to touch on quickly, once again, there was a lot of funding provided for the environmental bills that were passed previously and some new ones. There was $70 million earmarked for the strengthen the blue economy, $60 million in infrastructure at Davisville, 35 million for South County wind turbines, 21 million for a green bond proposal. Education is always a big part of the budget. Last year was no exception, but the amount of dollars allocated was significant. There's $300 million for new school construction, 67 million to offset funding that ended previously. 179 million was dedicated or allocated for the 3 state colleges for infrastructure improvements. And we also saw some improvements earmarked for small business. There was a reduction in unemployment insurance rates, reduced the penalties on delinquent tax payments. It created a taxpayer steward to help guide small businesses through that whole process. The cottage food industry was established through the bill, another area where the council has spent a great deal of time and effort. 6 million was allocated in the governor's program for Minority Business Accelerator, and 5 million was allocated for Main Street revitalization. So that just kind of touches on and gives you a flavor of what happened last session. But as I said, it also gives you a preview of what's going to be coming up this next section, which should be very, very exciting. I'd like to now switch over to let Diane give us an overview of the bill tracker that's used. Diane?
Thanks, Steve. I'm Diane Lynch, and I was a council member. I now serve on the Rhode Island Food Policy Council board. And I'm also the person that administers and manages the bill tracker. So I'm going to take a few minutes and explain to everyone how to use it, what it does, hopefully get some of you interested in learning more about legislation that affects you, your job, our food system. So there is actually a website that the General Assembly runs. It's called rilegislature.gov, and it tracks all the information that comes out of the General Assembly, the representatives, the senators, the bills, the committees. But it's really hard to use if you're not kind of a policy expert. There's no really user-friendly search mechanism. So you go on and there's thousands of bills. Every year, the General Assembly does several thousand bills, and it's a bit daunting. So we started the bill tracker a few years ago so that it's super user-friendly, it's super simple, and anybody who wants to see if there are any bills that are in the area that they work in or that they care about can quickly, within 5 minutes, go on the website and for free tap a few links and find out like what's going on. So the way it works is it is posted on our website. It's free. And on the website, there's a tab that says policy. And if you click on that, you'll see a sub-tab that says the bill tracker. When you bring that up, you're going to see a list of categories. So what we do is we look at every single bill that might have an impact on the food system every week. By the end of the season, it's usually a few hundred. And we categorize it by sort of the main impact area. It's a bit subjective. There's a lot of bills that actually impact many different areas. But the categories are access to healthy food, agriculture, climate change, environmental protection, equity and food justice, fisheries, food businesses, very broad, all food businesses, food safety, and wasted food and recycling and food recovery. Those are the main categories. So if you're a farmer or a fisher person, or you work in a business, or you have a small food business, or whatever your interest is, you just click on that area and it will take you to currently what the bills are in play that would affect you. Generally, most areas have a dozen to several dozen bills that are in play at any one time. Last year, as Steve said, there was a huge amount of bills that dealt with climate change and environmental protection. But that was fairly unusual. In the food business section, there's usually about 30 or 40 bills by the end of the session. What you'll find is the name of the bill and the bill number. The name doesn't tell you a whole hell of a lot about what the bill is. So we add 1 or 2 sentences that actually describe what is this bill trying to do? Is this bill trying to provide incentives for solar panels, or is this raising the minimum wage, or is this doing something else? So really short. And then it'll list the sponsor. That's the person that actually introduced the bill, usually wrote it as well, and co-sponsors. If that's all you need, great. If you want more, if you click on that, you will then go deep into the file and you'll learn everything that there is about the bill, including the text of the bill, whether there's a companion bill, what all the co-sponsors are, what committee it might be in, whether it's been heard, etc. If you're that interested. It's all up to date all the time. So the search engine is constantly updating it. But the way that we do it, the search engine aggregates all these bills. Once a week, I go through and I read all of them, and I kind of edit out the ones that really aren't important or got listed in there for some reason that doesn't really make sense. And then I organize them. And then on Monday mornings, most Monday mornings, like 99% of the time, I will publish a 2 to 3 paragraph write-up of sort of a summary of what happened the week before. And if some of those bills I know are of real interest to our communities, I'll highlight when they're actually going to be heard in committee. So give you a forward look. This is a bill that's going to be actually heard. So every Monday morning that goes out. And then at the end of the season, in July, I will then do a legislative wrap up. Not exactly what Steve does, because Steve is a policy expert and he's looking at everything. I'm just looking at sort of, what are the actual food bills that got through. So that's what it is. One or two caveats. The bill tracker is a neutral information source. It is not an endorsement. We list all the bills, whether we like them or not, whether we think they make sense or not. It's a public database that is available for anyone that wants to use it. Another thing, we tried to make it so easy that even if you're scared of legislation, you'll use it. If you find when you're using it that you think about ways to make it even easier, let us know. We've adapted it over the years and we're happy to keep adapting it. And then, as Steve mentioned, there's a lot of stuff that happens in the budget that doesn't actually get captured in legislation. And so if you're looking for a particular number and you're interested in it, it might be good for you to just reach out to the staff or reach out to me directly and ask, hey, I'm interested in this number. I can't find it in the listing of bills. Can you help me find the information I'm looking for? We generally will try. We have a policy committee made up of people like Steve and others that work on the Hill a lot and really, really have an in-depth knowledge. And that group, if you're interested, is always open, and they can always give you more detailed information. So that's it in like a nutshell. If you have any questions about how to use it or anything like that, you can always ask at the end of the session. I think I'm handing it off to Alice or Nessa.
That's okay, Diane. I'm going to actually show a picture of what the bill tracker looks like so people can visualize what you were talking about. And then Steve is going to go ahead and introduce our panelists. So I'll try to share my screen again. Did that work? Great. So here you can see a visual on the different categories that Diane listed off. All you have to do is click on the one you're interested in and it'll expand out to show you all the bills, as she mentioned. And now, Steve, I'll advance and we can see our panelists.
Thank you, Nessa. I'm just going to give a brief bio of each of our three speakers today. Raul Figueroa is originally from El Salvador. He's worked as a chef in New York, Boston, and Providence. In 2016, he became a full-time organizer and eventually the cooperative coordinator at Fuerza Laboral. I hope I said that correctly. An organization in Central Falls that works to end labor exploitation. He serves on the board of the Rhode Island Committee on Occupational Safety and Health and the Workers' Compensation Advisory Council of Rhode Island. He also serves as vice chair of the Blackstone Valley Community Health Center and as co-founder of Local Returns. Dawn King is a senior lecturer and director of undergraduate studies at Brown University Institute of Environment and Society. She earned her PhD in political science at Colorado State University and focuses her research and teaching on local food systems, state and local politics, and energy and sustainability policy. Their current research investigates food access programs and policy solutions to reduce and store greenhouse gases through sustainable agriculture. She currently serves as the chair of Red Tomatoes Board of Trustees and previously has served as the chair of the Rhode Island Food Policy Council. Our next speaker will be Vernon Martin III. Vernon works tirelessly towards racial equity and restorative justice for underrepresented Rhode Islanders. He founded an organization in 2019 called Kinfolk Benefit Foundation, now known as Kinfolk Benefit Trust. This organization is aimed at helping first-generation degree program enrollees graduate and move on to close the wealth and equity gap between people of color and their white counterparts. When he's not fighting for change, Vernon has been a chef as well as a machine operator and a batch maker, helping to produce essentials for COVID safety. So the four areas we're going to be talking about, if you could advance the slide, are food systems and change, wasted food prevention. Dawn will be talking about both of those. And then food access and nutrition security, which Vernon will touch on, and then food business and economy, which Raul will touch on. Obviously, these 4 areas represent the 4 main working groups that are part of the Rhode Island Food Policy Council. So first up, we'll have Dawn talk to us on the first 2 topics that we mentioned, climate change and food waste. So Dawn.
There, I'll unmute myself first. Thank you so much for the introduction, Steve. And just quickly before I get started, I wanted to send a huge shout out to Diane Lynch and the Rhode Island Food Policy Council with that bill tracker resource. I use it often and I direct people to that many, many times. So at least for me, that is an incredibly useful resource. So thank you all for doing that. I have been charged today with just chatting very briefly about food systems and climate change and our particular work group. And so they've asked me to say, what does the work group do? Who might be interested in joining the work group? And certainly anyone is welcome to join. And then to highlight what we did last year and highlight what our policy priorities are going to be moving forward into this year. So just very briefly, the climate change group has actually been quite fun. I think it's now 3 years now. And we've always viewed it as an education learning community as a means to really decide on our policy priorities. And really what that means is that every other meeting, we tend to bring in different speakers from different segments of the economy or different segments of the food system. And we just learn from them because food touches on so much and climate change touches on so much. So we've had meetings with or presentations given by American Farmland Trust. We've talked to kelp farmers. We've talked to the DEM, NRCS. We've brought up conversations surrounding the blue economy, a sustainable blue economy, regenerative agriculture, renewable energy on farms, wasted food. So it's a lot of stuff. And all of that is at the intersection of climate and food systems. And throughout that, one of the goals of the work group, besides just being that education and learning community, is to push to include food and agriculture in all of our climate change legislation. And I think we made a really some movement on that this past year. And then also to talk about what our policy priorities are going to be moving forward. And so there's a lot of opportunity to get involved. I'll in just a second, I'm going to talk about our policy priorities moving forward. But every year with new members and new ideas, those policy priorities can be shifted. So that's also, we're pretty flexible in that sense. So what did we do last year? We had a lot of conversations with state officials, including the Office of Energy Resources, the Department of Environmental Management, and maybe most importantly, the group of EC4 leaders, which is that Executive Committee for Climate Change, charged with figuring out how to implement a lot of our climate change rules. And we chatted with them and really pushed to include ag and food, and they act on climate implementation. So right now, there's not any focus on ag and food, whether it be emissions or whether it be carbon storage. And so we pushed for that. We also help with outreach and to host a webinar with the EC4 on the role of agriculture and food and climate change adaptation and mitigation. There were a lot of people on that webinar, so that was also really fun to do. There's a lot of interest in this. And then finally, just to chat about moving forward, what our policy priorities are going to be. And the first one, which is really at the intersection of food access and job creation, but also the environment, is farmland preservation, and specifically pushing for farmland preservation funding. As far as and specific policy priorities we've talked about, are increasing resources to increase the pace of farmland protection, to support food system related climate resilient projects within cities and also on farms, to establish more of a rural urban access commission, to increase access to farmland for historically disadvantaged farmers. And so these are all different types of sub policies under that main policy that is really of importance to us as farmland preservation. And this is especially important in Rhode Island where we have so little of it left. We do have, I guess, hot off the press from Nessa said that the DEM director is going to be, is publicly announcing that he is asking for $1 million in their funding budget for the year for the next 2 to 3 years for this in particular. So that is actually really exciting because that we can get on board with that. And that's something the work group can do, is help push that and help the DEM get to that level. So the farmland preservation is one. The next one is wasted food. So we have a whole subgroup that is working on wasted food and to minimize the amount of wasted food that's happening in the state of Rhode Island. First of all, it's incredibly wasteful. Second of all, we are filling our landfills. And third of all, something that could be used for good is that, and instead spewing methane into the atmosphere, which certainly has an impact on climate change. Well, one of our issue areas, or something that we're hoping to accomplish, is this spring to help aid in the returning the composting conference that we've had in Rhode Island, but it's been on hiatus since COVID. So we hope to support that, but also to take a step back and really look at wasted food. And there are so many different levels of wasted food, whether it be on farm, whether it be in transportation, whether it be at the grocery store, whether it be in our homes, and then of course what we do after it's no longer edible. And so there's going to be a lot of movement on developing a comprehensive strategy for minimizing and diverted wasted food from going into landfills. And this could be through rescuing leftovers on farms, working with organizations like Hope's Harvest for gleaning, the Means database, working with the Rhode Island Food Bank and other stakeholders. So we're also really excited to be pushing forward on wasted food solutions in the state of Rhode Island. I think I was asked to be very quick. So I was, but I will be here for the whole time if there are questions specifically about this work group and some of our policy priorities.
Thanks, Dawn. That was a lot of great information. So next up, Vernon is going to give us the highlights and expectations from the Food Access Group. Vernon?
Well, I want to begin by saying hello, everyone. I want to give like a large shout out and thank you to like Nessa, Caitlin, Josh, the group members, and all of you. Because to be quite candid, it is lunchtime, and you decided to be here with us. Yeah, I know this is an area of concern, and it falls into the scope of your work. So thank you very much for coming. But so now I understand you might have questions like who the heck is this guy? What makes him a desirable option to speak? Why here? Why now? And like those answers are simple. Yeah, I mean, I grew a passion for the work many years ago, not by choice. It was by a community service and paying off court funds. So through that process of doing manual labor to pay off the court fines, I got I felt something I hadn't felt before, a fulfillment that I hadn't felt before. So yeah, ever since then, I just volunteered where I could, and the rest is history. It's brought me here in front of you here today. All right, so yeah, more often than not, my feedback is informed and insightful. My solutions have merit, and my experience adds value to the group. More specifically with racial equity and restorative justice as well. My notes. So this was like a large process of figuring out what to say, figuring out where to really like bring the focus. But I found solace in this, like in the fact and the strength of the group. You know, this is a situation I put myself in to prove that I've really committed to the work, and I'm glad that I'm here. The group for the most part has been amazing. We've remained steadfast. We've stuck to the mission, which was to increase food access to underserved communities. There are about 60 board members, usually like 15 to 20. Yeah, somewhere around 15 to 20 usually attend the food access meetings. Yeah, and we've done nothing but just learn more about food access work around the state, what the members of the group are doing to move that forward. We also had a council retreat. We learned a lot where what stuck out for me was the Advocacy 101 worksheet. And we also spoke about next steps for the group. And overall, it was a really good time. I couldn't stay for the pick. It was too beautiful of a day. It really was one of the last ones. Yeah, it was an amazing retreat. You should come. You should. But yeah, we also talked. sorry. What also stood out was like people's thoughts on the school lunch program, the farm to school program, and also a new policy out in Vermont, as close as Vermont, about how they're dealing with security in their state, which looks very hopeful of something that we can replicate in Rhode Island. But oh yeah, so our next steps moving forward are to support the USDA's guidance on nutrition security in regards to food sovereignty, because they really do clash. And instead of arguing back and forth, we wanted to sit down and take a larger look at the big picture of what's going on to see how we can affect change in Rhode Island. They lay down a couple of laws. They do. They define some real guidance on like how to view the scope of the work. One of those being some definitions. So food security is like a household where all members at all times can access enough food for an active and healthy lifestyle. And nutrition security specifically is defined as a consistent access, availability, and affordability of food and beverages that promote well-being. They prevent and, if needed, treat disease, and particularly in racial and ethnic, low income, and rural and remote populations. So they give a real specific way to look at the work we're doing and how to like dispense these ARPA funds in those ways. So it's really interesting if you look into it. But yeah, they want to provide meaningful support, which kind of goes against food sovereignty. They want food sovereignty. One of the pillars of the idea is to stand on your own 2 feet, do not rely on outside sources, and really like dig in. And that goes against what the USDA is doing. So there's a robust conversation, arduous and robust conversations to be had. So yeah, we also want to look at equitable systems as well, and inclusive systems as well. Yeah, the group has remained steadfast in that as well. They've been very supportive of anyone with any good ideas, and they really give it the time of day. They do their due diligence. So I'm really proud to be a part of the group. Been a contributing member now for about the past year, and it's been amazing, like I said before. And next, I believe, is the conclusion. To conclude, I dream Rhode Island would be, I dream this place would be like a place where I could, mend broken relationships with my family, and it would provide opportunities for me. And Rhode Island has done that. I mean, I'm not really a school legislator, but they give me opportunities to be a real change maker in the community and in the state, and I appreciate that, and I hope to deliver on everything I said. So thank you very much for having me. Oh, one last thing. You know what else is arduous and robust? The work we've been doing in food business. Yeah, that's been really great work that we've been accomplishing. So here is Raul, and I'll hand it back off to Steve, and next person you should hear after that is Raul.
Thanks, Vernon, and thanks for the enthusiasm you show for food access. Next up, we're going to talk about food business, and Raul will lead that discussion and give us an overview of the work being done in that group. Raul?
Thank you, Steve. And thank you all for being with us here today. Just to start with a little bit of background on the food business economic development work group. I am one of the co-chairs of this group. I am going into my second year at the Food Policy Council. Josh was the previous chair of the group, but about 2 months ago, he gave us the honor to continue on his work, and but he continues to be, the support, as in, now that he's an associate director. And so, it's an independent network of food systems and stakeholders in Rhode Island, right? So it's open to anyone. It is chaired by his food policy members, but it's open to anybody who is interested in any of the the many topics of the food system. And we do have some really good conversations. We bring some guests. If there is a specific topic that we want to that we want to talk about, the staff really mobilize and make sure that we have either like the person who's responsible, the person who's who's in a position to talk more about the issue. And one of those issues this year was the cottage food bill, and it was really we all came together and we really saw this as an opportunity for people who are trying to go into the food business, or who decided to move into the food business during the pandemic. So this actually, this bill would allow them to actually make certain food items at home. So right now, I think we was the last state in the whole United States to not have a law like this. So even though it passed as one of the ways that Steve alluded to earlier, not as a traditional way, but it was included in the governor's budget, is still something that it's going to really benefit like the people who need it this year, right? So at the April meeting, we had the two sponsors of the bill, State Representative Corbian and Senator DiMario were the sponsors of the bill, and they came to one of our meetings and talked. We also had Cara Donovan, which is a personal resident who has been working on passing this bill for quite some time, and also speak to her experience, and what the passing of this bill will do for her, and how it will allow her to have supplemental income, and really working on developing a business that might otherwise be in a stage not ready enough to go into a commercial kitchen, but it's in a position that could eventually become that. And having that opportunity to do those items at home, to cook those items at home, it gives an opportunity to test the markets and to see if there's a viable business option, right? So during those conversations, we brought up some really important issues that eventually became part of the larger conversation among the whole group and among the rest of the Food Policy Council. So one of those things was a revenue cap. The revenue cap, I believe it was about 25,000. We wanted to make it, like not to have a revenue cap, but I know there's, when I talk about legislation, you had to make compromise. We were also talking about, what foods are in and which ones are out, which ones, you can actually make at home safely, and which ones, like we know that it will be a long stretch. We also talk about wholesale and consignment, and we also talk about required inspections, right? And it was it was really clear that people who want this bill to pass and who want this, take advantage of this, were willing to accept any requirements they need to do, but we also understand that it needs to be realistic based on the needs of the people who will benefit from this the most. And one of the most important parts about this group is that we all bring different ideas. We all represent different groups, different, both socially and geographically through Rhode Island. And also, one of the other important things is that we do have people who are experts in this. We have people who have been working on this for a lot. And for us, as being, in the group, it helps us really understand and learn more, especially if you don't work in food particularly. But it's also an opportunity for new people to join us and new people to come to these meetings so we can, like really inform and educate, which is the ultimate goal. As you can see, a lot of the groups actually intertwine with each other, and it's I think it's by design of the staff of the Food Policy Council. So round of applause for you all for the work that you do. But they also know that, like, especially when it comes to this, right, there's a great opportunity that, the bill, the bill was included. The cottage food bill was part of the budget, but then it comes to implementation and what does that really means, right? And one of those things is, one of those ways that you can support is through a second stage food business, right? We need to, we need to support this these people who want to make the transition from cooking at home and to a commercial kitchen. So we need capital investments, we need grants, incentives, loans, space and equipment, access to market, and all of those things that we really, that will make those business successful, right? And you might not know, but there's people who really we have interactions with almost every day, who are really looking at this as an opportunity to maybe change careers, or maybe have a second job, or maybe down road from what used to be a hobby into a potential business opportunity, which a lot of people actually make that transition to some time of their life, as I have. But we also have other, other priorities for 2023, which is not in any particular order, but, we want to have a little more focus on networking events. We want to make sure that people who are part of these groups and people who are in the food system have a platform or a place that we can meet and really, have that more interaction and personal connection. We also have a BIPOC food business listing and directory, and when we want to support those businesses who traditionally sometimes maybe are out of the way for many Rhode Islanders who don't like to drive very far, and maybe just to make that, make it a little easier and highlight what those businesses are and which ways you have to support it, connecting with food access, and maybe also, one of those things is working cooperatives, which is another area that is very dear to my heart. But it's also, in conversations that come up, that it's also of interest of the rest of the group. And that's kind of, overall kind of some of the things that we do. And, we're looking forward to connecting with the new council members and anybody who's interested in joining that group. The more, the better. And I know there's really exciting things coming up this year. So we're looking forward to working with all stakeholders and everybody who's interested in joining us. Thank you.
Thank you, Raul. That was good insight into the activities of the food business group. We're now going to move along to, and I thank all of the speakers for their participation and insights that they provided. We're now going to open it up to questions, and to facilitate that, we'll turn it back to Nessa.
Thank you. Yeah, and thanks to all of the speakers. We have time now for your questions. I'm sure you have a number of questions, and I believe everyone who's spoken, Steve, Diane, Don, Vernon, Raul, is available to help answer questions. You may also have questions that that others on the at this meeting can answer. So please either put your virtual or real hand up, or pop a question into the chat, and we'll see who wants to answer it. While you're thinking, I can also note that if your interest has been piqued in being a member of one of our working groups, as several folks noted, they are open to everyone. And if you're interested in a working group, you can just write to info@rifoodcouncil.org. And we will get you in touch with the staff coordinator for the appropriate work group. The work groups, again, there's the food access work group, the food business work group, the food systems and climate work group, and then a subgroup that is all about wasted food solutions. I see everybody putting their next meetings in the chat, the staff support people. We're happy to take any questions folks have about anything that happened last year during the legislative session, or any points of clarification or questions about the priorities of the working groups moving forward into the next session. Okay, are you sure you don't have any questions?
I mean, I'll speak really quickly.
Great.
Yeah, I just want to say thank you again. This is really has been like a challenging weekend. A lot of you don't know. Kinfolk Benefit Foundation is really like a legacy thing. It's to leave to my children. And my daughter has her senior project, and she chose a different topic, and she chose not to help me on the presentation today. So, oh, I was contemplating life, contemplating my mortality this weekend. But yeah, I was able to get it done. And thank you guys so much for thinking of me to speak. Thank you so much.
Thank you for making the time to be with us and for participating in the Food Access Working Group really from the beginning.
I'll ask a question. Hi, I'm Charlene. I'm the Family Outreach Coordinator from the Boys and Girls Club of Newport. So this is for all three working groups. This is my first meeting. My wheels always start spinning. And so my question is for all three of you at the same time. And Caitlin, she's gonna laugh when I ask this question. I know Caitlin's gonna laugh. Where does the SNAP program and where is some involvement with SNAP? I would see more maybe like with Vernon or maybe with Raul, but has anybody talked about SNAP and how we can get SNAP in our small businesses for people to accept SNAP benefits in restaurants? But that's one big thing. And another thing, has it been talked about maybe with the food systems group? Like, has there been any talk about in the way of waste, how to get foods and things to people that could possibly go to farms and use their food stamp benefits to get food before it goes rotten? So that's my question. Has anybody thought about SNAP and how we can put SNAP in any of the three categories of this council?
Excellent question. I wonder, Caitlin, if you want to go first, and then I see Vernon's hand is raised, and then maybe Josh after that.
Yeah, I'm so glad, Charlene, that you raised this, because I think that's one of the most exciting topics that we have to tackle this year in the food access work group and the food business work group. That's kind of one of the intersections that we all see developing between those two work groups. I think it's enabling local food producers to supply food to the emergency and supplemental food system so that food's healthier, more locally produced, fresher, including farms and food businesses. And then the opportunity to expand the restaurant meals program, as well as these small food producers that will now be able to get online because of the cottage food laws. How can we get them to accept SNAP? I know there's a lot of different support systems in place. I know Rhode Island Commerce is poised to help with technical assistance. I know there's some funding from the Department of Human Services to help smaller food businesses learn to accept SNAP. So there is a lot of potential this year, and that's definitely a topic I think a lot of people are really, really excited about. So I'm so glad you brought that up. I know Vernon wanted to comment on that as well.
Yeah, that's what made the whole the US, that's what really pushed us to choose like the USDA's guidance, because nutrition security specifically talks about that and about how to like provide subsidies and make it easier for SNAP for people who use SNAP to have it accepted at different vendors. So yeah, that's like really what pushed us to like get behind that USDA guidance and really explore like the relation to food sovereignty, because again, it goes directly against that guidance. So how can we tailor Rhode Island's food sovereignty plan to their guidance to be able to, get these funds like that most people really need?
And I'll just mention before I pass it over to Josh that there are a couple of programs that exist in the state that the council has been supportive of, including the Bonus Bucks program that is run by Farm Fresh Rhode Island and operates in many of our farmers markets, that doubles the value of SNAP dollars for when spent on fresh produce. and that there, I believe, was $11 million in the last budget to expand produce incentives into some supermarkets as well, which is being led by Rhode Island. It's going to slip my mind now.
The Rhode Island Public Health Institute.
Yes, Rhode Island Public Health Institute. And that also the Farm Fresh Rhode Island has been working with farm stands to help them get certified to accept SNAP as well. And that's an ongoing process. So I just wanted to note those particular things. And then Josh, didn't know if you wanted to add anything to that.
Just it's great questions, and I'm as Caitlin mentioned, there is that overlap in interests between the two groups. So folks in the food business work group have also expressed interest in working on the SNAP issue as well. So it comes from the ground up. Everyone who gets involved in the work groups shapes the direction of the work that we do. So and when there's energy around it, we can work on it. So I think there's going to be some natural connections bubbling up in our next meetings on this.
Does anyone else want to add anything in answer to Charlene's question, or does anyone have an additional question to ask? We probably have time for one more. Thank you, Thea. Thea and I think Caitlin have both put some helpful links in the chat in regard to in regard to SNAP. I guess I can also note that the Food Policy Council worked with Cartwheel Rhode Island to do some food delivery for SNAP users during a pilot during COVID, and that we do have a group of people who are working on Farm Bill priorities that we'll be sharing with our congressional delegation members. We focus mostly on the state level, but there is a core group that's interested in having an impact at the federal level on the Farm Bill in particular, and that one of the areas of focus for that group is likely to be inclusion in the SNAP program of funds covering delivery costs. Right now, there's more and more opportunity for SNAP users to order food to have it delivered to their homes if they're homebound for any reason, but they still have to pay the delivery fees for that, which creates obviously inequity. So that's an area that I think some of the people who are part of that Farm Bill group are going to be talking about, because any change to the SNAP program would have to be a change at the federal level. Let's see, I'll peek into the chat. I don't think I see any other questions. Some great comments and folks connecting, so we appreciate that. So I think we will leave it at that. Thank you all so much for being here. Allie is putting the note in about our next Policy for the People event, which is Food Advocacy 101 on October 11th at the same time. We'll also have a Farm Bill 101 in November, and we appreciate you for coming and hope that you will sign up and join us again. Thank you so much.